The sun rose slowly over the rolling hills, painting the wide open sky in shades of gold and pink. On the edge of one of these hills, an old ranch stood quietly, its wooden fences stretching across the land like the arms of someone welcoming the day. This ranch had been in the family for generations, passed down from father to son, and every board and stone seemed to carry the weight of memories. The old rancher Thomas moved along the fence line with the careful steps of a man who had spent decades on his land. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, each one telling a story of long, hard days under the sun. His hands, rough and calloused, had learned the language of labor, the touch of soil, the grip of a lasso, the strength needed to calm a frightened animal. Thomas's young son, Samuel, walked beside him. At 12 years old, Samuel had already learned more about ranch life than many boys his age. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who respected the land and the work it demanded. His small hands were eager to help, eager to be useful, and eager to understand the world his father had spent a lifetime shaping. This morning he carried a bucket of feed for the cattle, careful not to spill a single handful. Every time he looked up at his father, he saw more than a man. He saw a guide, a protector, and the example of courage he hoped one day to match. The ranch was alive in ways that might have seemed ordinary to an outsider but were sacred to Thomas and Samuel. The cattle moved slowly across the fields, lowing softly as if greeting the new day. Birds chirped in the trees along the fence line, their songs mixing with the distant rush of a stream that ran along the back of the property. The wind carried the scent of earth, grass, and wood smoke from the small cabin where the family lived. Every sound, every movement, felt like a part of the rhythm of life that Thomas had learned to read over decades. Thomas stopped for a moment to check the fence. He ran his hand over the weathered wood, feeling the small cracks and splinters. "We'll need to fix this section soon, Sam," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If the cattle get through, we'll have trouble." Samuel nodded eagerly, his eyes bright with understanding. He had helped his father repair fences many times before, and each time he felt a growing sense of pride. "I'll help, Papa," he said. "I want to learn how to do it right." Thomas smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "That's my boy," he said. "You've got the patience for it, and that's half the work right there." He handed Samuel a hammer, and together they began nailing the loose boards back into place. The rhythm of their work was almost like a dance, each movement familiar and comforting. Nails struck wood, boards shifted into place, and the fence slowly regained its strength. For Samuel, these moments were more than chores. They were lessons in responsibility, in care, and in understanding that the land depended on them as much as they depended on it. After finishing the fence, Thomas and Samuel moved on to the cattle. The herd was grazing peacefully, and the sight of it brought a sense of calm to both father and son. Thomas knew each cow by name and temperament. He could tell a cow was ill or restless just by watching the way it moved. Samuel was learning this too, mimicking his father's careful observations. "See that one with the white patch on her side?" Thomas asked. "That's Bella. She's strong but stubborn. You'll need to approach her slowly." Samuel nodded and stepped carefully toward the cow, holding out a hand. Bella sniffed him cautiously but allowed him to come closer. The pride in Samuel's eyes was evident. He was learning the subtle ways of communication between humans and animals, a skill that would one day define him as a rancher. As the morning wore on, Thomas led Samuel to the barn. Inside, the smell of hay and leather filled the air. Tools hung neatly on the walls, each one having its own place and purpose. Thomas showed Samuel how to check the saddles and bridles, teaching him how to care for the horses properly. "A good rancher takes care of his animals first," he said. "They're the ones who carry us through the hard days." Samuel listened closely, absorbing every word. He brushed the horses carefully, feeling the warmth of their bodies under his small hands, and learned the art of patience as the animals nuzzled him gently. By midday, the sun was high, casting long shadows across the fields. Thomas and Samuel took a short break, sitting under the shade of an old oak tree. Samuel pulled a small tin of water from his bag and offered it to his father first, as he had learned to do. They drank in silence for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the ranch. Thomas looked at his son and saw not just a boy, but a future he could be proud of. "You're doing well, Sam," he said softly. "Every day you learn a little more. That knowledge will stay with you forever." Samuel smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and responsibility. He wanted to be worthy of the trust his father placed in him. The peace of the ranch was not just in its work but in its quiet routines. Thomas and Samuel moved from task to task, repairing fences, checking cattle, and tending the small vegetable garden near the cabin. Each day followed this rhythm, simple but meaningful. Samuel loved these moments, loved the sense of accomplishment that came from seeing a problem solved or a task completed, and Thomas, despite the weariness in his bones, loved teaching his son, knowing that these lessons were more valuable than any wealth or treasure. Yet beneath the calm, a sense of unease lingered. Thomas had heard whispers from neighboring ranchers about a gang of men causing trouble in the area. They had been stealing cattle, threatening families, and leaving fear in their wake. Thomas tried not to let it worry him too much. He had faced challenges before and trusted in his strength and skill, but he knew that no matter how skilled he was, some dangers were unpredictable, and he could not always protect his son. He kept a watchful eye on the horizon, scanning the hills for anything unusual, while Samuel, unaware of the growing threat, continued his work with enthusiasm. As the day moved toward evening, the father and son returned to the cabin. The sky turned shades of orange and red, casting a warm glow over the land. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A small fireplace crackled, and the smell of cooking meat and fresh bread filled the air. Thomas and Samuel sat down for their evening meal, talking quietly about the day's work, sharing small stories and laughter. These moments, Thomas knew, were precious. They were the foundation of a life built on hard work, respect, and love. After dinner, Thomas took Samuel outside one last time. The stars were beginning to appear in the clear night sky, twinkling like distant fires. He pointed out the constellations, teaching his son their names and the stories behind them. "The stars are always there," Thomas said, "even when we can't see them. They guide us." Samuel listened, fascinated, feeling the vastness of the world and the importance of finding one's place in it. As they walked back to the cabin, Thomas felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had been long, but it had been good. He had worked hard, taught his son, and tended the land that had been his life. Samuel, tired but happy, felt a sense of belonging and purpose he could not yet fully describe. He knew that each day brought new challenges and lessons, and he was ready to face them alongside his father. Little did they know, the quiet peace of the ranch was about to be tested. Shadows were gathering beyond the hills, and soon, the world they had built would face a threat unlike any they had encountered before. But for now, under the gentle glow of the stars, father and son rested, unaware of the storm on the horizon, holding on to the calm and strength of a life rooted deeply in the land and each other. The next morning began like any other on the old ranch. The sun climbed slowly into the sky, spilling golden light across the fields, and the gentle sounds of the animals greeted the day. Thomas rose early, as he always did, checking the fences, inspecting the water troughs, and making sure the cattle were safe. Samuel followed, carrying a small satchel with food and water for the animals, eager to help in any way he could. They worked side by side, the familiar rhythm of the ranch comforting them both. But as they went about their morning tasks, a feeling of unease settled over Thomas. He had noticed tracks in the dirt near the edge of the property, fresh horse prints, uneven and hurried. His heart tightened. Though he had hoped the reports of trouble from neighboring ranchers were just rumors, these tracks told a different story. He glanced at Samuel, who was humming softly as he fed the chickens, unaware of the potential danger. Thomas placed a hand on his son's shoulder, not wanting to alarm him yet. "Stay close today," he said quietly. "We'll finish our work together." Samuel nodded, sensing the seriousness in his father's tone. The morning passed slowly, the work punctuated by Thomas's watchful glances toward the hills. By midday, the sun was high and the heat pressed down on the land, making every movement heavier. Thomas decided it was time to round up the cattle and lead them toward the barn for the afternoon feed. Samuel helped, guiding the younger calves with care, while Thomas steered the larger cows. Their voices called softly to the animals, a language of patience and gentle authority that the herd understood well. Just as they were nearing the barn, the sound of hooves pounding against the earth shattered the calm. Thomas froze, scanning the horizon, and his heart sank as he saw a group of men riding fast toward the ranch. Their expressions were hard, and the glint of metal in the sunlight hinted at danger. They were strangers, But the threat was clear. Thomas quickly guided Samuel behind him, placing himself between his son and the riders. "Stay behind me, Sam," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. The men dismounted, moving with quick, purposeful steps. One of them, taller than the others and with a rough, scarred face, stepped forward. "Hand over everything of value, old man," he demanded, his voice sharp and cold. Thomas squared his shoulders, refusing to show weakness. He had faced hard times before, and though these men were threatening, he would not surrender his home or his dignity easily. "I cannot do that," he replied calmly. "This is my land. My family lives here. You will find nothing that is yours to take." The leader's face twisted in anger at Thomas's refusal. "Then we'll make sure you regret it," he spat. The men advanced, closing the distance, and Thomas knew he had no choice but to protect both himself and his son. He held his ground, ready to defend what he loved, but he was outnumbered and could feel the weight of the threat pressing down on him. Samuel clutched his father's arm, eyes wide with fear, but he remained close, refusing to run. The bond between them, strong and unspoken, gave Thomas a surge of determination. The attackers moved quickly. One grabbed a wooden fence post and swung it toward Thomas, catching him off guard and knocking him to the ground. Samuel screamed, rushing to help, but Thomas pushed him back gently. "Stay down, Sam. Watch and learn, but do not come close." The men surrounded him, striking him repeatedly. Pain flared through Thomas's body, but he endured, refusing to cry out, knowing that any sign of weakness might encourage them further. Samuel watched helplessly, his heart pounding, wishing he could do something to stop the cruelty. The attackers laughed at the sight, cruel and loud, but Thomas held his ground as best he could. He shielded himself, absorbing the blows, all the while thinking of his son and the life they had built together. He could not let this moment define them. He had to survive, to show Samuel that courage and dignity mattered even in the face of fear. But the men were relentless, and Thomas felt his strength beginning to wane. Each strike left him more battered, and yet he refused to surrender. Finally, the leader, seeing that Thomas had suffered enough but still resisted completely, grabbed a satchel of money from the cabin and threw it at the old rancher. "This is all we're taking," he sneered. "Consider yourself lucky." With that, the men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving the rancher bruised, bloodied, and exhausted on the ground. Samuel rushed to his father's side, tears streaming down his face. Papa, are you okay?" he cried, helping him sit up. Thomas forced a tired smile, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm fine, Sam. I'll be fine. We'll get through this together." The father and son sat in silence for a few moments, catching their breath and taking in the devastation around them. The fence had been damaged, the cattle were scattered, and the barn had been ransacked. The physical injuries Thomas had sustained were serious, but the emotional weight of the attack pressed down even more heavily. Samuel kept glancing toward the hills, still hoping that the attackers might return, but he saw only the empty, calm horizon. "They'll come back, won't they?" he asked softly. Thomas shook his head, trying to instill some courage in his son. "We hope not, Sam, but if they do, we'll be ready. You must remember, fear can't control us. Courage can." After tending to his own wounds as best he could, Thomas began checking the damage to the ranch. Samuel helped, carrying tools and water, trying to assist despite his small size. The task was overwhelming, but Thomas used it as a way to teach his son an important lesson. "We rebuild," he said quietly. "Not just the fences in the barn, but our spirits. We do not let this break us. Remember, Sam, the land will always give us strength if we work with it, not against it." Samuel listened intently, absorbing every word. He had seen the worst of people today, but he also saw the resilience of his father, and he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. As evening approached, the father and son finally managed to repair the most urgent parts of the fence and secure the cattle. Exhausted, they sat together on the porch of their cabin, watching the sky turn shades of pink and purple. The wind carried the faint sounds of the stream in the distance, and for a moment, the world seemed peaceful again. Thomas took Samuel's hand in his own, holding it firmly. "You saw what happened today, Sam. You saw cruelty. But you also saw what courage looks like. You will carry this lesson with you, always." Samuel nodded, feeling both fear and admiration, understanding more than ever the value of strength, patience, and love. Night fell slowly, and the ranch was quiet once more, though a shadow of unease remained. Thomas knew that the attackers were unlikely to forget their encounter. They might return or they might move on, but either way, the event had changed the ranch forever. Samuel, lying in bed that night, replayed the scenes over and over in his mind. The terror of the attack, the sight of his father's resilience, the feeling of helplessness, it all mixed together, shaping him in ways he could not yet understand. But above all, he remembered his father's words. Courage and honor mattered more than anything, and those qualities could never be taken away. Though battered, the rancher's spirit remained unbroken. He held on to hope, knowing that some help might come from unexpected places. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, searching for anything that might signal aid or justice. Somewhere, he believed, a force of fairness and courage would rise to meet the injustice. As he drifted into a troubled sleep, Thomas held tightly to Samuel's hand, knowing that tomorrow they would face the world again, together. And in the quiet darkness, the bond between father and son grew stronger, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. News traveled slowly in those days, carried by horse and word of mouth, yet somehow it reached the ears of a man known for his courage and honor. His name was Kiva, an Apache warrior respected across the lands for both his skill and his strong sense of justice. Kiva had met Thomas years ago during a harsh drought, when the rancher had offered help to the Apache people, sharing food and water when it was scarce. Their friendship had grown from that act of kindness, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. When Kiva heard the tale of the attack on Thomas and his young son, something stirred deep inside him, a fierce determination to right the wrongs that had been done. Kiva mounted his horse at dawn, the soft morning light glinting off the strong leather of his saddle. He was a man of few words, but his presence was commanding. Every movement reflected years of experience, each step of the horse measured and steady. He rode across open plains, following trails only he could read. The wind in his hair and the rhythm of the horse beneath him reminded him of the freedom of the land. But his mind was focused sharply on the task ahead. Justice, he believed, was not about revenge. It was about restoring balance. And the outlaws who had harmed Thomas had disrupted that balance in a way that could not go unanswered. As Kiva traveled, he recalled the stories Thomas had once shared with him about the ranch and the boy who now had to face hardship far too early. He thought of Samuel's eyes wide with fear and confusion, and the way he had clung to his father during the attack. It was not just the physical harm that needed correction, but the sense of injustice and the feeling of helplessness that had been inflicted upon them. Kiva's heart tightened at the thought. He was determined to bring relief to the family and ensure that the attackers could not threaten anyone else in the region. The journey was long and difficult. The terrain shifted from flat plains to rugged hills, the kind that tested both horse and rider. Kiva navigated through narrow valleys and across streams, always keeping an eye on the horizon. He knew the outlaws were skilled riders themselves, and if they sensed him coming, they might try to hide or escape. Patience was key. He traveled quietly, speaking softly to his horse, guiding it with gentle hands while keeping his senses alert to every sound. Every rustle of grass, every call of a distant bird could signal danger or the trail he needed to follow. At night, Kiva camped under the stars, tending to his horse and reviewing the information he had gathered about the attackers. He had heard that they were a small gang, dangerous but overconfident. Such men often underestimated someone with skill and determination, and Kiva planned to use that against them. He sharpened his blade, checked his bow, and went over strategies in his mind. He did not rush, for he knew that haste often led to mistakes. Each step of this journey was as much mental preparation as it was physical, for he understood that the outcome depended on clarity, patience, and courage. Along the way, Kiva met a few travelers and ranchers who had seen the gang causing trouble in nearby areas. He listened carefully, asking questions about their numbers, their horses, and their usual routes. Every piece of information was valuable, a small clue that would help him track them down. These encounters also reminded Kiva of the importance of community and trust. Though he was strong and capable alone, the knowledge and cooperation of others made his mission possible. People had suffered under the gang's actions, and Kiva's determination grew stronger with each story he heard. As days passed, Kiva drew closer to the area where Thomas's ranch was located. The thought of seeing his old friend again, battered but unbroken, gave him a sense of urgency. He imagined the relief that Thomas and Samuel would feel when someone came to help, and it strengthened his resolve. Though he was aware that the journey was long and potentially dangerous, he rode with confidence, guided by purpose rather than anger. His mind was clear. Justice, not revenge, must prevail. One afternoon, Kiva crested a hill and surveyed the land below. He saw a trail of disturbance in the fields, a broken fence, scattered cattle, and marks in the dirt that told a story of recent chaos. He smiled slightly, knowing he was close. The evidence confirmed what he had already learned. The gang had passed through, leaving fear in their wake. Kiva moved quietly, following the trail while keeping low and hidden. He wanted the outlaws to be unaware of his approach until the moment was right. Patience, he knew, would give him the advantage. As he followed the trail, memories of Thomas's kindness and wisdom came to mind. He remembered the calm, patient way Thomas had spoken to his son, teaching him not just to care for the land but to care for others, to act with integrity and courage. These lessons were rare and precious, and Kiva understood that protecting them was more than a matter of justice. It was about honoring a way of life that Thomas and his family represented. The thought of young Samuel, now learning about courage under such frightening circumstances, added weight to Kiva's mission. By nightfall, Kiva set up a temporary camp near a stream. He tended to his horse, feeding and watering it, and then sat by the fire, quietly reflecting on the journey. The flames cast flickering shadows, and he thought about what the confrontation with the gang might look like. He did not underestimate them, nor did he wish to harm more than necessary. His goal was to restore balance, ensure the family's safety, and prevent further wrongdoing. He reviewed the stories he had heard, imagining each outlaw and planning how to approach them with both strategy and caution. As the moon rose high, Kiva allowed himself a moment of calm. The stars above reminded him of the vastness of the land and the smallness of individual struggles. Yet he knew that small actions could create lasting change. Every choice he made on this journey had consequences, not just for himself, but for Thomas, Samuel, and the surrounding community. He thought of the peaceful mornings on the ranch, of the lessons shared between father and son, and he felt a renewed sense of determination. This mission was not just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about preserving the harmony and dignity of life in these hills. The following morning, Kiva resumed his pursuit. The trail led him through narrow canyons and over rocky ridges, each step bringing him closer to the outlaw's hiding place. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced countless challenges, guided by experience and an unwavering moral compass. As he rode, he visualized the confrontation ahead, not with anger but with focus, clarity, and the knowledge that the right course of action would make the world better. He reminded himself that justice was not about personal gain or revenge, but about correcting a wrong and restoring peace to those who had been harmed. By late afternoon, Kiva reached a small clearing where the gang had been reported to rest. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to a tree and moving carefully through the brush. His eyes scanned the area, noting the positions of the men, their horses, and any obstacles. He planned his approach with precision, ensuring that he would have the element of surprise. Though he was skilled and confident, he did not act recklessly. Every movement mattered, and he understood that patience and strategy were more powerful than brute force alone. As he waited in the shadows, Kiva thought about the lessons Thomas had imparted, and about the courage young Samuel had shown even in fear. These thoughts gave him strength, reminding him why he was doing this. The outlaws had caused harm, but they had also underestimated the power of honor, determination, and wisdom. Kiva's calm, steady presence was a reminder that justice could arrive even in the most difficult circumstances. Finally, as the sun began to set, Kiva prepared to move. His plan was not just to confront the gang, but to ensure that they understood the consequences of their actions. He would act swiftly and decisively, using his skills to protect the family and restore the balance that had been disrupted. Every step, every decision, was guided by his respect for life, his sense of honor, and his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. As night fell over the plains, Kiva moved silently toward the clearing, ready to face the challenge. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of smoke and dust from the gang's camp. He adjusted his stance, steadying his breath, and prepared to bring justice for Thomas and Samuel. The journey had been long and difficult, but he was ready, and as the stars shone above, he knew that courage, honor, and determination would guide him through the night, toward the restoration of balance and the protection of those who could not defend themselves. Kiva moved silently through the shadows, the fading light of evening stretching the outlines of the clearing before him. The gang of outlaws had settled near a small cluster of rocks and sparse trees, their horses tied loosely and grazing, unaware that someone was watching. Kiva crouched low, his eyes sharp and focused, taking in every detail. He could see the leader, the tall man with the scarred face, giving orders in a low voice, while the others laughed and joked as if the chaos they had caused was a game. He paused for a moment, remembering Thomas and Samuel back on the ranch, the fear in the boy's eyes, and the strength his father had shown despite the blows he had suffered. That memory fueled his resolve. Kiva was not here to fight for anger or revenge, but to restore balance and ensure that the outlaws could no longer harm anyone. He took a deep breath, letting the quiet of the land surround him, and then began to move forward with careful precision. Every step Kiva took was calculated. He avoided dry twigs that might snap underfoot and stayed hidden behind rocks and brush. His presence was undetectable, a shadow among shadows. The outlaws remained oblivious to the danger approaching them, overconfident in their own strength. They had believed that no one would come for Thomas, and now that arrogance would be their weakness. Kiva approached the nearest outlaw first, a younger man who had wandered slightly away from the group. He moved swiftly, using his strength and agility to subdue him before he could call for help. The outlaw struggled briefly, but Kiva's calm authority and precise movements left no room for resistance. He tied the man securely with a rope, ensuring he could not escape or alert the others prematurely. Every motion was efficient, controlled, and purposeful, reflecting years of skill and training. One by one, Kiva approached the others, using strategy over force. He created distractions, leading some away from the main group and cutting off escape routes. He used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage, moving silently and invisibly across the clearing. Each outlaw found himself confronted not by chaos or confusion, but by a steady, deliberate force that he could not ignore. The shock of encountering someone so skilled and determined began to unsettle them. Confidence faltered and fear took root. The leader, noticing the sudden disappearance of his men, shouted in confusion. His sharp voice carried across the clearing, demanding answers, but no one responded. He spurred his horse forward, thinking to chase after the missing men, only to be confronted by Kiva himself. The warrior's eyes met the leader's, calm and unyielding, and the message was clear. The chaos had ended and justice was here. The leader hesitated, realizing that he had underestimated the skill and determination of the man before him. Kiva spoke firmly, his voice low but commanding. Your actions have caused harm. You have disrupted peace and taken what did not belong to you. That ends now. The leader tried to challenge him, but Kiva's confidence and steady stance left no room for argument. The other outlaws, now gathered and tied, watched in silence. The balance had shifted completely, and they understood that their control over the situation was gone. The confrontation was not just physical. It was a battle of wits and willpower. Kiva moved with deliberate intent, guiding the outlaws toward an understanding that their behavior had consequences. He retrieved the stolen items, returning them to their rightful owner in the mind and memory of the land itself, even if not yet physically. The message was clear. Harm to others would not go unanswered, and respect must be restored. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing, the tension began to ease. Kiva had subdued the outlaws, tied securely and aware that they could not escape. Their arrogance had been replaced by humility, and the fear of accountability had settled in. He spoke to them again, explaining that this was a lesson, not just punishment. You must learn that strength is not in harming the weak, but in protecting what is right. Leave this land and do not return to cause fear and pain. The outlaws, understanding the gravity of the moment, nodded in silence. Once the confrontation was complete, Kiva untied the captured men from the open clearing and guided them to the edge of the hills, ensuring they could leave safely but would not return to harass the ranch or anyone else in the area. His approach was firm yet fair, reflecting his sense of justice. There was no cruelty, no desire for vengeance, only the restoration of balance and protection for those who had been harmed. With the immediate danger removed, Kiva paused to consider the path back to the ranch. The journey had been long and difficult, but he knew his task was not yet finished. Thomas and Samuel still awaited reassurance that the threat had ended. The warrior's heart was steady, knowing that the lessons of courage and integrity he had demonstrated would resonate not only with the outlaws, but also with the young boy who had witnessed fear and strength side by side. The return to the ranch was quiet but purposeful. Kiva moved swiftly, the horse responding to his commands as if it understood the urgency of the mission. The evening air was cool, carrying the scents of earth and grass and the soft sounds of nocturnal animals beginning their nightly routines. Each step brought him closer to the place where his friends awaited, and with each moment his resolve strengthened. He thought of the father and son, of their courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and he felt a deep sense of connection to their struggle. When he finally crested the last hill overlooking the ranch, Kiva's eyes took in the familiar sight of the old wooden fences, the scattered cattle, and the cabin where Thomas and Samuel lived. Relief surged through him, tempered by the awareness of the work still to be done. He approached the ranch carefully, calling out softly so as not to startle anyone. Thomas emerged from the cabin, his body still bruised from the attack, but his eyes brightening at the sight of Kiva. Samuel ran forward, tears and relief mixing on his face, and the boy threw his arms around the warrior. Kiva dismounted, placing a steady hand on Samuel's shoulder. "You are safe now," he said gently. "The danger has passed. The men who harmed you and your father will trouble this land no more." Thomas approached, leaning heavily on a walking stick, but his face was filled with gratitude and pride. He clasped Kiva's hand firmly. "I knew you would come," he said quietly. "I trusted you and you did not disappoint." The reunion was quiet, yet filled with profound relief and a deep sense of justice restored. After ensuring that the family was safe, Kiva spoke to Thomas about what had happened. He explained how he had tracked the outlaws, subdued them without unnecessary harm, and ensured that they could not return to cause trouble. Thomas listened intently, nodding, grateful not only for the action taken but for the wisdom and restraint shown by Kiva. Samuel, still holding the warrior's hand, asked questions eagerly, wanting to understand how courage and strategy had worked together to protect them. Kiva explained calmly, teaching the boy that true strength lay in patience, intelligence, and respect for life, not just in physical skill. As night settled over the ranch, the stars shining brightly in the sky, the family sat together, feeling the peace return to their land. The fences were intact, the cattle were secure, and the outlaws were gone. More importantly, the sense of fear that had hung over them had lifted, replaced by confidence and hope. Thomas looked at his son and Kiva, recognizing the lessons that this ordeal had brought. Courage, he knew, was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it with honor. Kiva stayed the night at the ranch, ensuring that all was safe and giving advice on how to prepare for any future threats. He spoke gently to Samuel, encouraging him to continue learning, observing, and practicing patience. The boy listened carefully, absorbing the wisdom of a man who had not only protected them, but had also demonstrated the principles of fairness and integrity. The rancher, meanwhile, began making plans to strengthen his property, inspired by Kiva's guidance and determined to protect what was his most dearly loved. By the time the first light of dawn touched the hills, Kiva had prepared to leave. He mounted his horse, ready to return to his own home, but before departing he turned to Thomas and Samuel. "Remember," he said, "justice is not about punishment alone. It is about protecting what is good, teaching lessons when needed, and ensuring that harm does not continue. Carry that with you, and you will be strong." Thomas nodded, deeply moved, while Samuel's eyes shone with newfound understanding. As Kiva rode off into the morning light, the ranch stood quiet and peaceful once more. The threat had been removed, the balance restored, and the lesson learned. Father and son watched until the warrior disappeared over the horizon, feeling both gratitude and inspiration. They knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, courage, integrity, and determination would guide them, just as Kiva had shown them. The first light of dawn stretched across the ranch, bathing the fields in a gentle golden glow. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth, and the quiet of the morning seemed to hold a new promise. Thomas stepped outside the cabin, stretching his tired body and taking a deep breath. His bruises and aches were still present, reminders of the attack that had tested him and his son, but his spirit felt lighter. The land, which had been shadowed by fear, now seemed to welcome him with a sense of calm. Samuel followed closely behind, still sleepy but eager to start the day. His small hand slipped into his father's as they walked toward the barn where the cattle waited. The young boy's eyes were bright, carrying both relief and curiosity. He had learned more in the past few days than he ever expected to, and the lessons went beyond caring for the land. Courage, resilience, and the meaning of justice had become real to him. Lessons taught not through words alone, but through the actions of the people who cared for him and his father. The barn, which had been damaged during the attack, now seemed more like a symbol of perseverance than a ruin. Thomas and Samuel worked together, repairing broken boards and reinforcing fences. Each strike of the hammer and every shift of a board felt purposeful. Thomas encouraged Samuel, praising the boy's attention to detail and steady hands. "Every repair we make," he said, "is not just for today. It is for the future. The land and the animals depend on us, and one day you will carry on this work with wisdom and pride." Samuel nodded, taking the words deeply to heart, feeling the weight and importance of responsibility. After tending to the immediate repairs, Thomas took a moment to reflect on the past few days. He thought about the attack, the fear, and the pain, but also about the bravery he had witnessed, his own, his son's, and that of Kiva, the Apache warrior who had come to their aid. The act of justice had been swift and fair, but it carried more than physical protection. It carried a lesson that would remain with them forever. Thomas understood that life was often unpredictable, and that strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, patience, and moral courage were just as vital. Samuel, curious and eager, asked questions as he worked alongside his father. "Papa, why did Kiva help us? Why didn't he just leave?" Thomas smiled at the boy's earnestness. "Because he believes in doing what is right, Sam. Courage is not about acting only when it is easy or safe. It is about standing up for what is fair and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Kiva wanted to make sure that no one could harm us again, and that is why he came." Samuel nodded thoughtfully, feeling a mixture of admiration and determination. He wanted to be brave like Kiva, to act with fairness and integrity when the time came. The day passed quietly, but productively. Thomas and Samuel moved from task to task, restoring the ranch to its proper order. The cattle were checked, the fences reinforced, and the barn organized. Each small action seemed to restore not only the ranch but also the sense of security that had been shaken by the attack. As they worked, neighbors began to arrive, offering help and support. Word of the outlaws' defeat had spread, and the community wanted to ensure that the family was safe and that the ranch would continue to thrive. Thomas welcomed them, grateful for their generosity and for the strength of human connection that had always been a part of life on the plains. By evening, the ranch had regained much of its former order. Thomas and Samuel sat on the porch, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. The father looked at his son, seeing both the innocence of childhood and the beginnings of wisdom and courage. "Sam," he said softly, "what we faced these past days was difficult, but it also taught us something important. Life is not always fair, and people can make choices that bring harm. But courage, fairness, and the willingness to do what is right, these are the things that make us strong." Samuel listened, absorbing the words, understanding more deeply than ever the meaning of honor and responsibility. The story of Kiva's arrival and the confrontation with the outlaws became a tale that the rancher and his son would remember forever. Samuel asked his father to recount every detail again, from the moment the gang had approached the ranch to the quiet, steady movements of the warrior who had restored balance. Thomas spoke patiently, emphasizing the lessons rather than the fear, making sure that the boy understood the importance of courage guided by wisdom. The memory of Kiva, the calm authority, and the clear sense of purpose inspired Samuel in ways he could not fully express. Over the following days, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. The events of the attack and the arrival of the warrior had changed them, but they also strengthened the bond between father and son. Samuel began to notice the small things, the way his father handled animals with patience, the careful consideration given to every repair, and the thoughtful planning that went into protecting their home. These observations became lessons in themselves, teaching him that courage was not just about action but about preparation, attention, and thoughtfulness. Thomas, meanwhile, reflected on the importance of community and friendship. The support of neighbors and the intervention of Kiva had reminded him that strength alone could not ensure safety and justice. Life was a combination of personal effort, trust in others, and the ability to respond wisely to challenges. He shared these insights with Samuel, who listened closely, internalizing the meaning behind every word. The boy understood that bravery was not simply facing danger, but facing it with honor, intelligence, and compassion. One afternoon, Thomas and Samuel rode through the fields together, checking the cattle and enjoying the quiet beauty of the land. Samuel spoke of his dreams for the future, inspired by the lessons he had learned. "Papa," he said, "I want to help others too. I want to make sure no one feels helpless like I did." Thomas felt a surge of pride, knowing that his son had understood the deeper meaning of courage and justice. "You will, Sam," he replied. "And remember, helping others begins with understanding and respect. You do not need to fight to be brave. You need to act wisely and fairly." Evenings became a time for reflection and teaching. Thomas and Samuel sat by the fire, talking quietly about the day's work, the lessons learned, and the hopes for the future. Samuel's questions were thoughtful, and Thomas answered with patience, weaving the experiences of the past days into lessons that would guide the boy throughout his life. The memory of the attack remained, but it no longer held power over them. Instead, it became a source of strength and understanding, a reminder of resilience and the importance of doing what is right. The ranch itself flourished. Fences were rebuilt stronger than before, cattle were safe and healthy, and the land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Neighbors came occasionally, sharing stories, offering advice, and helping with chores. Thomas welcomed their presence, recognizing the value of community and the bonds that had been reinforced by the recent events. Samuel observed these interactions closely, learning not only the skills of ranch life but also the importance of trust, kindness, and cooperation. As time passed, the memory of the outlaws and the attack became part of a larger story, a story of resilience, courage, and the power of justice. Samuel often spoke of Kiva, imagining himself acting with the same calm determination and fairness. He understood that true courage was not about fearlessness but about taking the right action despite fear, guided by wisdom and integrity. Thomas watched his son with pride, knowing that the lessons of the past days had been imprinted deeply on the boy's heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to shine, Thomas and Samuel sat together on the porch, listening to the gentle sounds of the land. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the distant hum of insects settling in for the night. Thomas placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder and said, "The world will always have challenges, Sam, but the way we respond, the courage and wisdom we show, defines who we are. Never forget the lessons you have learned, and always act with honor." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight and truth of the words, knowing that he was ready to face life's challenges with his father's guidance and Kiva's example in mind. The ranch stood quietly, strong and resilient, a symbol of the enduring power of family, courage, and justice. Thomas and Samuel, now bonded even more deeply through their shared experiences, knew that the trials they had faced had shaped them, teaching lessons that could not be learned in any other way. The memory of the attack and the arrival of the warrior became a story they would tell again and again, not as a tale of fear, but as a testament to courage, wisdom, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. And so, life on the ranch returned to its rhythm. The fields stretched wide and green. The cattle moved calmly through the pastures, and the sun rose and set as it always had. But within the hearts of Thomas and Samuel, a quiet strength remained, a strength born from fear faced with courage, injustice met with fairness, and the knowledge that true honor lies in protecting what is right. The events of the past days had passed, but their lessons would last a lifetime, guiding the boy as he grew, and ensuring that the spirit of justice and resilience would continue to thrive on the old ranch. Under the care of a father and son who had faced the storm and emerged stronger than before,